leak that shook the NBA. 3 weeks ago, people around the NBA genuinely believed the Golden State Warriors dynasty was finished. Not struggling, not slowing down, finished. The fear inside league circles was becoming impossible to ignore. Steph Curry was aging. The roster looked broken. The chemistry felt exhausted. And Steve Kerr? For the first time in years, he looked like a man emotionally preparing to walk away from everything he had built. That's when ESPN made their move. And according to multiple reports, it was one of the wildest offers ever presented to an NBA coach in modern basketball history. The network was reportedly prepared to offer Steve Kerr nearly $7 million a year to leave the Warriors and become the new face of their NBA coverage. But the money wasn't even the shocking part. ESPN allegedly offered him something even more valuable in today's sports media world: protection. No screaming debate shows, no fake drama, no forced hot takes, no circus, just basketball. Just Steve Kerr breaking down the game at the highest level while the network built its future around it. Think about how insane that really is. A major sports network was reportedly willing to restructure parts of its entire NBA presentation just to land one man. That tells you exactly how desperate ESPN has become behind the scenes. Ratings, pressure, competition from NBC and Amazon. Fans constantly criticizing coverage quality. For years, ESPN has been searching for a true basketball voice that fans actually trust. Someone with credibility, intelligence, championship, DNA, someone who could instantly make viewers stop changing the channel. And deep inside the company, executives reportedly believe Steve Kerr was finally available, because only days before the leak exploded across social media, the Warriors season had ended in disaster. Golden State walked into Phoenix fighting for survival and walked out looking like a dynasty at the edge of collapse. The body language was terrible. The energy looked dead. Steph Curry looked exhausted, carrying a broken roster through another painful season. Draymond Green sounded uncertain about the future. Even Warriors fans started wondering if the final chapter had already arrived. But then came the moment that truly shook the NBA world. After the Warriors were eliminated, Steve Kerr walked towards Steph Curry and Draymond Green at center court. Cameras caught the entire thing. The embrace lasted longer than normal, the expressions felt heavier than normal, and then Kerr said words that immediately sent panic through the fan base. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I love you guys to death. The second that clip hit the internet, everything changed. Fans started preparing for goodbye posts. NBA insiders began speculating about retirement. Media companies quietly entered attack mode because to many people watching, that didn't sound like a frustrated coach after a loss. It sounded like a man saying farewell to the dynasty he helped create. And honestly, Steve Kerr looked tired. Not physically tired, spiritually tired. Tired of watching injuries destroy another season. Tired of trying to squeeze championship basketball out of an aging core. Tired of carrying the emotional pressure that comes with coaching one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history. For over a decade, Steve Kerr had lived inside non-stop expectations. Finals pressure, championship pressure, legacy pressure. Every single season in Golden State felt like the entire basketball world was waiting either for another title or for the empire to finally collapse. And after the Warriors' brutal ending in Phoenix, that collapse suddenly felt very real. That's why ESPN saw an opening. The network knew Kerr already had a broadcasting background. Long before he became the coach of the Warriors dynasty, Steve Kerr was already respected as one of the smartest voices in basketball television. Calm, sharp, funny, insightful, the exact opposite of modern hot take culture. ESPN executives reportedly believed he could become the centerpiece of their NBA future overnight. And for the first time in years, Steve Kerr reportedly listened. But what nobody realized at the time was that this decision was never really about television. It was never truly about money either. Deep down, Steve Kerr was wrestling with something much more emotional than business. Because walking away from the Warriors didn't just mean leaving a job. It meant leaving Steph Curry behind. And that's where this story becomes something much bigger than basketball. Before we go any further, I want to hear from all of you watching right now. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city and state in the comments below. And if you believe Steve Kerr made the right decision staying with Golden State, press 1-inch the comments. If you think he should have taken the ESPN deal and escaped the pressure completely, press 2. And if you love deep NBA stories packed with drama, emotion, and behind-the-scenes details the mainstream media never fully explains, make sure you subscribe right now, because this story is only getting crazier from here. The night the dynasty collapsed, April 17th, 2026, Phoenix, Arizona. That was the night the Warriors stopped looking like a wounded champion and started looking like a dynasty running out of time. Golden State walked into Phoenix fighting to keep its season alive, but from the opening minutes, everything felt wrong. The energy was flat. The defense was late, the shots were forced. And before the Warriors could even settle into the game, the Suns had already punched them into a massive early hole. Steph Curry tried to pull them back, because that is what Steph Curry has done for more than a decade. But this time, the magic never arrived. Every possession looked heavy. Every shot looked difficult. Every camera shot of Curry showed the same thing: exhaustion. Not anger, exhaustion. The kind that comes from carrying a franchise for too long. Golden State made one small push before halftime, cutting the lead and giving fans a brief reason to believe. But Phoenix never panicked. In the second half, the Suns took control again, and the Warriors slowly faded possession by possession. The bench went quiet. Draymond Green looked drained. Steve Kerr stood on the sideline with a face that said more than any press conference ever could. By the fourth quarter, it no longer felt like a basketball game. It felt like people were watching the end of something. The final score was 111-96. Season over. But nobody remembers that night, only because of the score. They remember what happened after the buzzer. Steve Kerr walked towards Steph Curry and Draymond Green at center court. The three men embraced, and the moment immediately felt different. Longer, heavier, more final. Then Kerr said the words that sent Warriors fans into panic. "I don't know what's going to happen next, but I love you guys to death." That sounded like goodbye. Within minutes, the clip spread everywhere. Fans started speculating, insiders started talking, media companies started watching closely. Because Kerr didn't look like a coach already planning next season. He looked like a man wondering whether the dynasty he built had finally reached its ending. And later, in the post-game press conference, he didn't calm anything down. He said he needed time. Time to think, time to meet with ownership, time to figure out what came next for the Warriors. That uncertainty was terrifying because Golden State wasn't just losing games anymore. They were losing time. Curry had battled injuries. The roster looked older. The season had been damaged by a brutal setback. The championship core that once terrified the league now looked fragile. Even Draymond Green admitted publicly he wasn't sure Kerr would return. That was the opening ESPN had been waiting for. Because from the outside, Steve Kerr suddenly looked like a man standing at the edge of the fire, deciding whether he still had enough left to walk back in. ESPN smelled blood. The moment Steve Kerr's future became uncertain, ESPN moved aggressively. Not casually, aggressively. Behind the scenes, executives reportedly believed they were staring at a once-in-a-generation opportunity. A championship coach, a proven broadcaster, one of the most respected basketball minds alive. And for the first time in years, he suddenly looked available. Because the truth is, ESPN had been searching for an NBA identity for a long time. Different finals crews, constant criticism from fans, endless comparisons to TNT. Even with the rights to the NBA Finals, the network still didn't have a true basketball voice people completely trusted. Steve Kerr could change that overnight, and according to reports, ESPN was willing to go incredibly far to get him, not just financially. Structurally, the network reportedly offered Kerr nearly $7 million a year and was even willing to keep him away from the network's famous hot take debate shows entirely. No screaming matches, no fake arguments, no manufactured controversy. That detail shocked people around the league because it proved ESPN didn't want Kerr to become another loud television personality. They wanted him to become the face of serious basketball coverage. Calm, smart, credible. The exact opposite of modern sports media chaos. And honestly, the timing made sense. NBC was rebuilding. Amazon was entering the NBA media war. TNT still dominated basketball culture. ESPN needed something bigger than another analyst. They needed legitimacy. Steve Kerr represented that legitimacy perfectly. Long before becoming the coach of the Warriors dynasty, Kerr was already respected as one of the best analysts in basketball television. Fans trusted him, players respected him, broadcasters loved working with him. He explained basketball in a way that felt intelligent without sounding forced. That's rare, especially in today's media world. So when the Warriors season collapsed and Kerr suddenly sounded emotionally drained, ESPN saw an opening. They believed the pressure, the injuries, and the exhaustion of coaching an aging dynasty might finally push him toward television permanently. And for a moment, it looked possible. Because from the outside, Steve Kerr had every reason to walk away. The Warriors looked older, the roster looked fragile, the dynasty looked like it was slowly breaking apart. ESPN offered comfort, no pressure, no heartbreak, no responsibility for saving a fading championship core. For most people, the decision would have been easy. But Steve Kerr wasn't thinking like most people. Because while ESPN was offering him safety, Steph Curry was quietly giving him a reason to stay in the fight one more time. the voice ESPN couldn't ignore. What made this entire situation so dangerous for the Warriors was simple. Steve Kerr wasn't just qualified for television, he was built for it. Long before he became the coach of a dynasty, Kerr was already one of the most respected voices in basketball broadcasting. Calm delivery, sharp analysis, natural humor. He had the rare ability to explain complex basketball ideas without sounding robotic or fake. Fans trusted him immediately. That's why ESPN viewed him differently from almost every other former player turned analyst. This wasn't some celebrity experiment. Kerr had already proven he could dominate television years before he ever coached Steph Curry. Back in the early 2000s, Kerr joined TNT as a game analyst and quickly became one of the network's most respected personalities. He worked alongside legendary broadcasters, covered playoff games, conference finals, and major NBA events, and quietly built a reputation as one of the smartest basketball communicators in the industry. And unlike a lot of television personalities, Kerr didn't rely on controversy. He relied on credibility. That mattered, especially now, because modern basketball media had started exhausting fans. Every day felt like nonstop arguments, fake outrage, and forced narratives designed only for clicks. But Steve Kerr represented something different. He sounded authentic, measured, honest, like somebody who actually loved teaching the game instead of performing for social media. An entire generation of basketball fans had already grown up listening to Kerr's voice. Not just on TNT, but inside NBA video games too. Before many younger fans even knew him as a coach, they already recognized him as part of basketball culture itself. That's what ESPN understood better than anyone else. Steve Kerr didn't need television to become famous. He was already trusted. And in today's media world, trust is worth millions. The network reportedly believed Kerr could instantly become the centerpiece of its NBA coverage for the next decade. A stabilizing presence, a championship voice, someone capable of making fans believe in the product again, which is exactly why the offer became so aggressive. Because ESPN knew opportunities like this almost never happen. Legendary coaches rarely become available while still respected, relevant, and emotionally connected to the game. But behind all the television rumors, Steve Kerr was privately wrestling with a much harder reality. Walking away from basketball sounded peaceful. Walking away from Steph Curry did not. And deep down, that emotional conflict was becoming impossible for him to ignore. The Warriors were falling apart. The hardest part for Steve Kerr wasn't the losing. It was watching the dynasty slowly break apart in front of him. For years, the Warriors looked untouchable. The movement, the shooting, the confidence. Golden State didn't just win championships, they changed basketball itself. But by the 2025-26 season, that version of the Warriors barely existed anymore. The roster looked exhausted. Steph Curry missed significant time battling injuries, and every absence exposed how fragile the team had become. Jimmy Butler's devastating ACL tear shattered whatever momentum the Warriors still had, while more injuries continued piling up across the roster. By the end of the season, Golden State no longer looked like contender. They looked old, and Steve Kerr knew it. That's what made the situation so emotionally draining. He wasn't coaching a young, rising team full of endless possibilities. He was trying to extend the life of a dynasty that everybody could see fading in real time. Every loss felt heavier. Every road trip felt longer. Every conversation about the future became more uncomfortable. Even Draymond Green openly admitted he wasn't sure Kerr would return next season. Think about that for a second. One of the emotional leaders of the dynasty publicly questioning whether the head coach was nearing the end. That's how unstable everything had become. And inside the organization, difficult conversations were already starting. The Warriors knew changes were coming. The old formula wasn't working anymore. The league had gotten younger, faster, more athletic. Meanwhile, Golden State was still trying to squeeze one more championship run out of an aging core that had already been through years of playoff wars. The pressure on Kerr became enormous, because no matter how legendary your resume is, dynasties don't get protected forever in the NBA. Eventually, every empire reaches the same painful question. Do you walk away before everything collapses? Or do you stay loyal until the very end? That's why ESPN's offer became so tempting. For the first time in years, Steve Kerr had a clean exit sitting right in front of him. Millions of dollars, less stress, more freedom. A chance to protect his legacy before the Warriors completely fell apart. And honestly, nobody around the league would have blamed him for taking it. But there was still one problem. Every time Kerr looked at the Warriors, he didn't just see an aging roster. He saw Steph Curry, and as long as Steph Curry still believed another championship run was possible, Walking away suddenly became much harder than anybody expected. The secret meetings. After the season ended, Steve Kerr disappeared for a while. Not publicly, emotionally. The Warriors had just suffered one of the most disappointing endings of the Dynasty era, and inside the organization, everybody understood the next few weeks could change the future of the franchise completely. Because this wasn't just about a contract anymore. It was about whether Steve Kerr still believed in the Warriors at all. Behind closed doors, Kerr began meeting with owner Joe Lacob and general manager Mike Dunleavy. Those conversations reportedly stretched across multiple weeks, and they weren't simple discussions about salary numbers or contract length. They were deeper than that, much deeper. The Warriors needed honesty, real honesty, the kind organizations usually avoid when dynasties start aging. Kerr needed to know where the franchise was heading. Ownership needed to know whether Kerr still had the energy to keep fighting through another exhausting season. And according to reports, difficult topics came up quickly. The roster needed changes. The system needed adjustments. The old formula that once dominated the NBA no longer guaranteed success. Golden State reportedly wanted philosophical changes in how the team operated moving forward. Different lineup approaches, different roster construction, a more realistic understanding of where the dynasty actually stood compared to the rest of the league. In other words, this was no longer about protecting the past. It was about surviving the future. At one point, Kerr reportedly stepped away completely for several days, taking a golf trip to clear his mind after the emotional collapse of the season. That detail might sound small, but internally, it mattered a lot. Because people close to the situation said Kerr didn't look burned out from coaching itself. He looked burned out from losing. There's a difference. Steve Kerr still loved competition. He still loved the strategy, the pressure, the adrenaline of meaningful basketball. What exhausted him was watching the Warriors slowly drift away from championship level while carrying the emotional weight of the dynasty every single night. And during these private meetings, both sides reportedly had to confront something uncomfortable. The Warriors era everybody loved was changing, maybe permanently. For over a decade, Golden State had operated with confidence, continuity, and dominance. But now for the first time, uncertainty had entered the room. Nobody could guarantee another title. Nobody could guarantee health. Nobody could guarantee the dynasty had one last run left. That reality forced Kerr into the hardest decision of his coaching career. Because while ESPN was offering him peace, the Warriors were offering him one more war. And deep down, Steve Kerr still hadn't decided which one he wanted more. Steph Curry changed everything. In the end, this entire story came down to one person, Steph Curry, because every logical reason told Steve Kerr to walk away. The pressure was exhausting, the roster was aging, injuries were piling up. ESPN was reportedly offering millions for a far easier life. From the outside, leaving Golden State actually made perfect sense. But basketball dynasties are never built only on logic. They're built on relationships, and Steve Kerr's relationship with Steph Curry became impossible to walk away from. Behind closed doors, people around the organization understood something important. Kerr didn't want to abandon Curry during the final years of his career. That emotional connection mattered more than contracts, media opportunities, or public speculation, because nobody understood Steph Curry better than Steve Kerr. Together, they changed basketball forever. They built a dynasty around movement, spacing, trust, and unselfishness. 4 championships, 6 finals appearances, a style of basketball that reshaped the entire NBA. And through all the pressure, all the criticism, and all the championship expectations, Curry and Kerr remained tied together as the emotional foundation of the Warriors era. That history carried enormous weight, especially now. Steph Curry was still playing elite basketball when healthy. Kerr knew it, the Warriors knew it, and deep inside, Kerr reportedly believed walking away now would feel wrong if Curry still had another real championship push left in him. That's why Curry handled the situation carefully after the season ended. He didn't publicly beg Kerr to stay. He didn't create drama. Instead, Curry spoke about Kerr with calm respect, almost like he understood how emotionally difficult the decision had become. And according to people close to the situation, that approach may have impacted Kerr more than any emotional speech ever could have, because it reminded him what made the dynasty special in the first place. Trust, loyalty, partnership. At some point during those private conversations with Warriors ownership, the situation reportedly became clearer for Kerr emotionally. The frustration wasn't with coaching itself, it was with losing, with injuries, with watching the dynasty slowly fade. But as long as Steph Curry was still there, part of Kerr still believed the story wasn't over yet. That belief changed everything. Suddenly, ESPN's offer no longer looked like an exciting new chapter. It looked like an escape route. And Steve Kerr wasn't fully ready to escape. Not yet. Because competitors like Kerr don't easily walk away from unfinished business, especially when the greatest shooter in basketball history is still asking you to believe one more time. And once that emotional realization hit him, the direction of this story started changing fast. The $7 million temptation, the offer was real, and the deeper details made it even crazier. According to reports, ESPN was prepared to pay Steve Kerr nearly $7 million a year to leave coaching and return to television full-time. For most people, that number alone would have ended the conversation immediately. But this wasn't just about money. It was about lifestyle. No more pressure-filled playoff runs. No more sleepless nights after brutal losses. No more dealing with injuries, rotations, locker room tension, or nonstop criticism from fans and media. ESPN was reportedly offering Kerr a clean, comfortable, high-profile future built entirely around basketball conversation, and they were willing to customize the role specifically for him. That's what shocked so many people around the NBA. The network reportedly told Kerr he could avoid the hot take debate culture completely. No fake arguments, no daily screaming matches, no manufactured controversy designed for social media clips, just basketball. Just Steve Kerr explaining the game at the highest level. Honestly, it sounded perfect. Kerr already had television experience. Fans respected him. Players trusted him. The transition would have been seamless. He could have protected his legacy, stayed connected to the game, and escaped the emotional grind of trying to save an aging dynasty. And after the disastrous Warriors season, many people believed he would take it. Because from the outside, Golden State looked exhausted. Steph Curry was aging. The roster needed major changes. Injuries had destroyed another season. The dynasty that once terrified the league now looked vulnerable for the first time in years. ESPN saw all of it. They believed Kerr was emotionally worn down enough to finally leave. But there was one thing the network underestimated. Steve Kerr still loved the fight, not the politics, not the pressure. The competition, people close to the situation said Kerr never truly sounded burned out from coaching itself. He sounded tired of losing. Tired of watching the Warriors fall short. Tired of seeing injuries slowly chip away at the dynasty. That's a completely different kind of exhaustion. Because competitors don't always walk away when things become painful. Sometimes pain actually pulls them back harder. And that's exactly what started happening to Steve Kerr. The more he thought about leaving, the more one question kept following him. What if Steph Curry still has one more championship run left? That question changed everything. Suddenly, $7 million didn't feel as important anymore. Television didn't feel as meaningful. Comfort didn't feel as satisfying because deep down, Steve Kerr realized something simple. ESPN was offering him safety. Steph Curry was offering him purpose. And once he understood that difference, the decision slowly became unavoidable. The decision that stunned the league on May 9th, 2026, the suspense finally ended. Shams Charania broke the news that Steve Kerr had agreed to a new 2-year contract to remain head coach of the Golden State Warriors. Just like that, weeks of speculation exploded across the NBA world. Steve Kerr was staying, and the reaction around the league was immediate. Because after everything that happened, the collapse in Phoenix, the emotional post-game comments, the ESPN rumors, the uncertainty surrounding the dynasty, many people genuinely believed Kerr was preparing to walk away. Instead, he chose to walk back into the pressure. The details of the contract only made the story even bigger. Kerr's new deal reportedly made him the highest-paid coach in the NBA once again, earning well over $17 million annually. That number created a massive gap between Kerr and every other coach in basketball. But inside the Warriors organization, the money wasn't viewed as the most important part. The commitment was, because Kerr staying sent a message to the entire league. Golden State still believed the dynasty had life left in it. That belief immediately shifted attention toward the Warriors' offseason plans. Reports started surfacing that the franchise would aggressively search for another star-level player to help maximize the final years of Steph Curry's career. Ownership reportedly wanted one more legitimate championship push while Curry was still performing at an elite level. And keeping Steve Kerr became the foundation for all of it. Around the NBA, executives understood exactly what this meant. As long as Kerr and Curry remained together, Golden State could never be fully counted out. Their partnership carried too much experience, too much chemistry, and too much championship history to ignore. But what made Kerr's decision so fascinating was this. He didn't choose the easier life, he chose the harder one. He turned down the comfort of television, he turned down a future with less stress, less criticism, and less emotional exhaustion. Instead, he stayed attached to the pressure, uncertainty, and heartbreak that comes with trying to extend a fading dynasty. And honestly, that decision told people everything they needed to know about who Steve Kerr really is. Because at 60 years old, with championships already secured and legacy already protected, most people would have taken the safe exit. Steve Kerr chose competition instead. He chose Steph Curry instead. He chose one final fight instead. And deep down, that decision may have revealed something the rest of the NBA didn't want to hear. The Warriors still believe their story isn't over yet. He chose the heartbreak. When people look back at this moment years from now, They probably won't remember the exact contract number. They won't remember every rumor, every insider report, or every television debate that surrounded Steve Kerr's decision. They'll remember the choice. Because in the end, Steve Kerr was given two completely different futures. One offered comfort, the other offered heartbreak. ESPN reportedly offered him millions of dollars, freedom from pressure, and a chance to smoothly transition into the next chapter of his basketball life. No more exhausting playoff runs, no more sleepless nights after crushing losses. No more carrying the emotional weight of an aging dynasty every single season. Most people would have taken that deal instant. And honestly, nobody would have blamed him. Steve Kerr already had the resume. 4 championships as a coach, multiple rings as a player, a legacy completely secured. He had nothing left to prove to anybody. But competitors rarely think like normal people, because deep down, Steve Kerr understood something that defines almost every great dynasty in sports history. The hardest thing in the world is not building greatness, it's walking away from it, especially when there's still even a small chance the story isn't finished yet. That's why Steph Curry mattered so much in this entire situation. As long as Curry still believes another championship run is possible, Kerr still feels emotionally connected to the fight. Their partnership became bigger than basketball years ago. Together, they changed the NBA forever. They changed how the game is played, how teams are built, and how modern offenses operate. And maybe that's why Kerr couldn't leave, because leaving now would have felt incomplete. Instead, he chose the difficult path. He chose pressure. He chose uncertainty. He chose another season of expectations, criticism, and emotional exhaustion. He chose to keep fighting for one more championship even when the rest of the basketball world was already preparing for the dynasty's ending. That decision says everything about who Steve Kerr is. Some people run from pressure when things start falling apart, others walk directly back into the fire. And right now, the Warriors are still standing, because Steve Kerr decided this story deserves one more chapter. Maybe Golden State wins another championship. Maybe they don't. Maybe the dynasty truly is nearing its end. But one thing became very clear through all of this. Steve Kerr never wanted comfort as badly as he wanted purpose. And sometimes, purpose is worth more than money. That's the real lesson behind this entire story. Not basketball, not television contracts, not media drama, loyalty, belief, and the refusal to walk away from people you still believe in. Now, I want to hear from all of you. Do you think the Warriors still have one more championship run left with Steph Curry and Steve Kerr together, or is the dynasty finally entering its last chapter? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep NBA story, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and hit the like button, because we're going to keep bringing you the biggest drama, stories, and behind-the-scenes moments from around the NBA world. Press 1 if you believe the Warriors still have one more run left. Press 2 if you think the dynasty is officially over. And we'll see you in the next story.